Jimmy didn't believe that anybody wanted to listen to what some old cowboy from East Texas had to say. But he was wrong, and I think that y'all can learn a lot listening to his story and our experience with HCC. In the 1990s, Jimmy found out that he had hepatitis C during a routine blood donation. And so he saw a specialist, and he also found out he had cirrhosis. At that time, the treatment options for Hep C were very limited, and he had no symptoms, and so he decided against treatment. He wasn't told that he needed tests or ongoing surveillance, and the possibility of HCC wasn't mentioned. The only thing he took away from that visit was that he would die of liver failure one day. So almost 20 years later, in December 2020, Jimmy started having severe stomach pain, and then it went up to his shoulder. And so I took him to the ER, and they discovered he had pancreatitis. They did an ultrasound followed by a CT scan, and the CT scan showed a lesion on his liver. And the ER doctor was concerned that the cirrhosis and the Hep C had advanced to liver cancer. And so he recommended us seeing a GI. Well, it was the week before Christmas, and it was difficult to find a specialist, especially in Sulphur Springs, Texas. The only GI we had at that time was out of town. And so the ER doctor sent a referral to the GI, but the scheduling department at the hospital didn't consider it an emergency. And so the first available appointment was in 3 months. In the meantime, Jimmy was still having extreme stomach pain, and so we made several trips back to the ER and also to his primary care physician. And we kept telling them that he was having pain in his abdomen, it was going up to his shoulder, and and letting them know that he had cirrhosis and Hep C. But they kept running tests on his heart and everything but his liver. His PCP was jumping through hoops trying to get an MRI scheduled. The insurance did approve multiple heart tests and even a mammogram. Charlie might have breast cancer, right? But they wouldn't approve the one test that could have showed that he had liver cancer. So 3 months later, we finally had our appointment with the GI, and he ordered an MRI, and guess what? The insurance approved it. And so the MRI did confirm that Jimmy had HCC, and at the time there was one tumor and some small satellite lesions. Because Jimmy really liked and trusted the GI, we let him take the lead, and he helped guide us through the HCC treatment maze, and we discovered it was a maze. The GI wanted Jimmy to have a transplant. I wanted Jimmy to have a transplant. The problem was Jimmy didn't want a transplant. Because of the shortage of livers available, Jimmy didn't want to take one that he said could possibly go to a younger person who still had children to raise and hadn't had a chance to live their life. He said that he'd lived his life and that it had been a heck of a ride. So we told the GI, not to proceed with getting on the list. He still continued to see the GI because he also treated Jimmy's hepatic encephalopathy and then later on his esophageal varices also. But the GI referred him to an oncologist for the actual cancer treatment. The oncologist prescribed Lenvima as the first line of treatment, and Jimmy took it for several months, but he had really bad side effects from it. And the next MRI showed that it wasn't working, and now there were multiple tumors in his liver. And the oncologist told us that he only had weeks to live if we didn't do something else, and the only option was immunotherapy just to try to get us more time. And so Jimmy started Opdivo infusions. His health continued to decline during the treatment, and his legs and his feet were horribly swollen, even though the GI had added an extra diuretic to try to help with that. And his liver enzymes were too high, ones that were supposed to be high were low. His whole metabolic panels were horrible. But his tumor markers were going down. And that's what the oncologist seemed to focus on. His health got so bad that I called the GI, and we went in and talked to him, and he looked at everything, and he felt that the immunotherapy was shrinking the tumor, but that it was also destroying what little was left of Jimmy's liver, and that it was going to cause liver failure. And so we asked him what would he do if it was him. And he said that he would go on hospice. And he told Jimmy that, he could always go back on treatment, later if he decided to. Some of our family members weren't happy with our decision to stop treatment and get on hospice. They felt like it meant that, Jimmy was just giving up and he was ready to die, but that wasn't what it was. At that point, we had no choice. When we met with the hospice team, though, they reassured us that their main focus was going to be improving his quality of life, and they were going to treat his symptoms and manage his pain. Before we started hospice, his health had really deteriorated. His pain was really, really high, and he could hardly get out of bed. And so when he started hospice, his quality of life was horrible. But with the support of the hospice team during that last year, his health improved, and he even gained back some of the 50 pounds he had lost and also some muscle mass. And he actually felt like living, and that last year of his life was just a blessing. And by March 2022, he was a different person. He was able to work in the yard with me and help me in the garden. And with the help of hospice, he arranged for us to have a wedding and renew our vows. You can see right there that's the hospice team with us, the nurses and the bereavement counselor and the activities volunteer coordinator. And we attended a bunch of the local rodeos and street dances that summer. Jimmy had once competed in those same rodeos and even won a few. And that's, as you can see, that's some of the rodeos, and that's us at the last street dance that we were at. And then on his last birthday, on September 10th, 2022, I was able to take him to see American singer and songwriter Ray Wiley Hubbard in concert. He'd always been one of Jimmy's favorites, but he had never been able to see him live. I'd actually bought tickets to 2 previous concerts, but Jimmy didn't feel like going, and so we didn't get to go. But that night we did, and like I said, it was on his actual birthday, and there he is. He was having a great time. And it really meant a lot to him. We were right there he sat on his walker right there at the front, and so we were right at the front and had a really great time. And it's a memory I'll always cherish. And then our family ended up being thankful and for the love and the care that the hospice provided, and realized that we had made the right choice. And in fact, Jimmy asked the chaplain to speak at his funeral because they had gotten so close. Please remember, access is tough. Since we live in rural Hopkins County in the small community of Peerless, which isn't even on most maps, access to specialists and treatment was really hard. The nearest town is Sulphur Springs, but there are no oncologists, no interventional radiologists, no liver specialists, no cancer centers, etc. You have to go more than an hour away to get to anything like that. So please keep this in mind when you tell your patients that they need this test or to see this specialist, especially in rural areas, that sometimes it's not as easy as it sounds. The next one is don't assume. Don't assume if the patient already has some information or that maybe they've simply disregarded the advice of a previous doctor. We discovered that we didn't know lots of things that we should have known. And the doctors treating him there at the end were shocked to discover that he hadn't gotten tests over the years that could have caught the cancer sooner. We didn't know anything about the test. And lastly, don't judge. The bottom line is no matter what choices anyone makes in their life, no one deserves cancer. Jimmy didn't deserve to get cancer because he liked tattoos and beer. I didn't deserve to become a widow at 59 and lose the love of my life because my husband liked tattoos and beer. There is definitely a stigma associated with HCC because of some of the risk factors. Lung cancer has the same problem. It's really sad that some patients can be afraid to seek treatment because of the reaction they may get. And I know there were times that Jimmy refused to go to the ER when he should have because he didn't want to deal with someone's judgment. And it shouldn't be that way. If Jimmy could tell you something to take away today, it would be to cherish every day and never stop living. He said that cancer didn't beat him because he didn't stop living. Whether you have 1 day or 1 week or 1 year, it doesn't matter. Don't give up. Don't have a pity party, as he liked to say, but live every day as long as you can. And he did. Jimmy lived up until the end. Thank y'all for letting me share a little bit of my cowboy with y'all today.